All right, here we go. I'm driving home from southwestern Pennsylvania back to Greenville. I'm on Interstate 79, and it is a long drive, and I'm bored, and my mind is racing. All these thoughts bouncing around my skull piece. And so here's what happens whenever thoughts start bouncing around my skull piece. I say to myself, self, let's do a car rant. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to do an Interstate 79 car rant. Woohoo! Gnarly, baby. All right, so what's the subject? I don't think this is going to surprise you. Big Pharma. All right, now, disclosure right off the bat, because I know that there are folks out there, because I hear them all the time, they're going to say, Richard, now come on. We know it's much more complex than that. Richard, it's not all about Big Pharma. There were many other issues involved with that. All right, I want to get this out of the way right from the front, right from the jump. No freaking kidding. I mean, how insulting is that for you to suggest that I don't understand that there are more factors than Big Pharma? But all that aside, Big Pharma is a big factor. I don't know, 50% of the problem comes from Big Pharma. 75% of the problem comes from Big Pharma. Okay, it's a complex issue, but Big Pharma is culpable. And they've admitted to their culpability. They've admitted to their responsibility. 3 executives went to jail. FDA fines. They paid them. They said, we lied. We lied. We talked about it being less than 1% being addicted. We talked about it being a non-addictive drug. We lied. They said this. They are clearly at fault. But here's the bigger concern. Couple bigger concerns. The narrative that's being rewritten. Here's the narrative. The narrative for a while was they flooded the market with opioids. And they overprescribed, and that contributed to the opioid epidemic. Now what they're saying, what Big Pharma is saying is, we want to help solve the problem because the problem really wasn't the overprescription of opioids. The problem is those damn addicts out there. Less than 2% of the folks who became addicted. I saw this in an article the other day. I'll link it in the comments section. Less than 2% of the folks who took the medication as prescribed wound up becoming addicted. That's what they're saying. That is an absolutely misleading statement. Of course, less than 2%. Because here's the deal. If you become addicted and you start messing around with these things, you are immediately not taking them as prescribed. So really, they're just saying less than 2% became physically dependent, and they became dependent despite the fact that they took them as prescribed. Do you see the absolute insanity of trying to float that? But they're going to float it, and they're going to get away with it because they got away with it before. Here's the other thing. Whatever. Okay, so let's concede that. Less than 2% who took them the way that they were supposed to became addicted. I've actually had conversations with people who are in recovery who can't get this. Do you understand that the overprescription of medication and all these meds laying around medicine cabinets, and the fact that people could get these things hand over fist, created a market, created supply that people were able to go after, and created a culture where taking pills was acceptable? That taking pills as 17 or 18-year-olds is acceptable. And that was the pharmaceutical companies that created that culture. I'm in recovery from opioid use disorder. I know what it's like to go to the doctor and be given these things and literally in your mind have this mentality, it's no big deal. And to not acknowledge that as part of the problem and to just stick to these kind of like quantifiable kind of manipulated statistics like 2%, less than 2% became addicted who took it as prescribed. That's the exact same thing they did at the beginning of this process when they said less than 1% will become addicted. And if you are in recovery and you buy into this narrative, you're buying into the old school addicts suck narrative. People in recovery should all stand up and they should be banging on Big Pharma. And they should be saying that they need to be held accountable and they should be demanding reparations. If you buy into this idea, you are a token to the Big Pharma movement. If you buy into the idea that less than 2% became addicted, if you buy into the idea that it really wasn't a pharma problem, that it was an addict problem, well then you're part of the problem. And I want to go on the record with one thing. I don't care anything about who's taking money from Big Pharma. This has nothing to do with that. Don't start talking about that, because it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with one simple fact. They are guilty. Big Pharma, especially Purdue Pharma, is guilty. I was practicing in Western Pennsylvania. I got clean in Western Pennsylvania when they were pushing OxyContin. I saw it. I saw it with my own two eyes. That whole freaking Rust Belt was just torn up. In Purdue Pharma, it wasn't because they were trying to get it to legitimate pain patients. Now, that's another thing. Here's the other argument. You're going to screw legitimate pain patients. I'm not screwing anybody. Purdue Pharma is screwing them. So as far as I'm concerned, they're public enemy number one. Woo! All right. Interstate 79 car rant is over. You have an absolutely wonderful evening.